Control, Alt, Delete. Hey guys, it's John bringing you a premium deck profile today. For this particular profile, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at a deck that I actually think has some very strong matchups in today's metagame. This deck being Deletors. Now, this particular build plays more of a defensive strategy, meaning it tries to stop your opponent from multi-attacking as much as possible, while at the same time trying to gain advantage through means such as deleting your opponent's Vanguard while restanding yours. However, since I don't own every single card at the time of this recording, I thought it would just be a good idea to fire up OBS and show you guys digitally. If you like this style of content, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try to do more profiles like this in the future. But without further ado, let's get into this interesting deck profile. Enjoy! Alright guys, so the following list that you see here was of course made by using the official Decklog Bushiroad website. A link will be in the description down below. Of course the site is in Japanese, but by using possibly a combination of the Vanguard wiki, you could probably have an understanding of the cards here in their descriptions. Now I'll be going over the list card by card in order to facilitate and explain the necessary reasons as to why I run this particular lineup. If you'd like to take a screenshot of the list, of course you can do so now, and I'll be doing the G-Zone at a later point in the video. So, without any further ado, let's go on to our Grade 3 lineup. Alright, so we are going to start out with an interesting rare that came out of the V-Series and Silver Dust Blaze, and that is Ditto Deletor Bayon. So, Ditto Deletor Bayon reads as followed. At the beginning of each battle phase, you choose one of your opponent's Vanguards, and this unit increases or decreases by the power of that unit's power until the end of the turn. So, in Standard, it didn't make that much sense to run this particular card, only because in most cases you're thinking of maybe a 12 to 13k base for defensive plays, which is really not that much if you're riding this guy on the Vanguard. However, in Premium, this makes an amazing card for defensive plays, because if your opponent is striding, that means that this card is going to be anywhere between 28 to 33k, which is amazing for defensive plays. It stops multi-attacks by, if you think about it, most multi-attacks tend to try to go around anywhere between the 13 to 18k range. And it stops super big push turns by being able to be just a giant wall and you just sit there. With luck, actually, you could probably deck your opponent out before they can make any necessary breakthrough plays. So overall, it's a very funny card and a very strong card. Definitely give this guy a try. So our next card is going to be a bit of a throwback, meaning if you've played with this particular card in the past, you know exactly how annoying it is. And that card is, of course, Star Vader Freeze Ray Dragon. Now this card, we don't care about the limit break effect, we actually care about the second part of this effect, which reads as follows. When a card is put into the damage zone, you may choose one of your opponent's rear guards and lock it. Now, this card is super strong in this deck, but especially strong in the premium format as it stands right now, for two reasons. One, it stops Blademaster, and two, it stops Fenrir. Those are two of the strongest decks I personally think of in premium at the moment, and this card just says no to both of them. It locks the Vision token, and it locks either the Gleipnir or it locks the Wise Man. So if you're going against one of those two decks, or if you're just going against a multi-attack deck in general that doesn't run resist, this card is just going to have a field day on them. It is an amazing card. I highly recommend to pick it up as a 4 of. I think at the time of this recording, it might actually have been sold out on TCG Player. Of course, Henry will probably tell you about it in the market watches. But, of course, let me know if you think this card is of any value. Alright, so moving on to the Grade 2 slots, we of course have a very strong Grade 2 in the form of Lie Down Deletor Given, the V-Series version. So this card reads as follows. At the end of the battle that this unit attacked, if your opponent's Vanguard is deleted, you may pitch a total of 6 cards from both your hand and on the field, and if you do, restand your Vanguard, drive -1. Now in V-Series, this card was okay, I guess. I mean, at most you're probably using the restand play for a finishing turn. And, you know, if it was on Force 2, of course, you'd have the extra critical, which is nice. But in Premium, this card is amazing. Because what you would normally do is you would stride into something like an Aeodian and have the ability to restand. And while you have the initial triple drive, then you're only losing 1 drive into the twin drive. And, which is also really cool, is that because we're playing in Premium, if you check a stand trigger, you can restand this unit and therefore do his effect. Again, it is not once per turn. meaning you can use this to make sure your Vanguard restands and attacks multiple times. It is a super strong card, it's often underlooked, and it is your push and kill card. Very important piece, we run it as a 4 of. Alright, so moving on, we have another 4 of for our grade 2 slot, which is going to be in the form of Clipping Deletor Evo. So, Clipping Deletor Evo reads as followed. Counterblast 2, when he's placed on the rearguard circle, if your opponent has a deleted Vanguard, search your deck for any card with Deletor in its card name, and call it to the rearguard circle, shuffle your deck. This is a very good utility card, allowing you to search for any combo piece that you might possibly need for your kill turns or for your push turns. This card allows you to search for your Givens, it allows you to search for your Zuigis, it allows you to search for even a Ditto Deletor if you need to, if you're pushing in your opponent for whatever reason, or, you know, I don't know, setting up for some wombo combos. Overall, the card is super good for its utility, it's super good for its consistency. Yes, it's a cost of Counterblast 2, but if you play premium in this sort of back and forth method and you're able to control your damage, it's a super good card in order to get necessary combo pieces that you need. Okay, so our last slot here is going to be a bit of a flex spot, meaning you could probably run anything you kind of want here. You could probably run a Bobo, you could run a Photon, but what I choose to do is run a particularly old card that was quite annoying in my playroom back in the day, and that is, of course, going to be Forbid Deletor Zaqualad. Its effect reads, Counterblast 1 card with Deletor in its card name. If your opponent's Vanguard is deleted, it gets 2k, and if it hits, your opponent cannot stride on their next turn. I think they gotta be at grade 3, but you get the idea. This card is super annoying in the fact that if your opponent is, you know, facilitating damage or you're trying to damage deny them, this card kind of helps play in that regard, and the fact that if they want to take a damage, that means this is the card you're going to be attacking with, and if they let it hit, well, they can't stride next turn, which kind of stinks for them. There are, of course, certain cards that don't need that, but, I mean, you play it for the fun memes, nothing else, I guess. Try it out, let me know what you think. Moving on! Okay guys, so now we're going to be moving into the grade 1 lineup. Of course, this lineup can be flexible, so you can probably put in anything that you see would be comfortable for you. Now, this particular lineup I found comfortable as it stands for the TCG format. However, keep in mind that at the time of this recording, there is a Deletor promo that we don't own, and I will be probably putting it on the screen now. Now, this card in itself is actually very strong for the fact that it can be sacked for your given turns without you losing as many cards in your hand and field. Therefore, when this card comes out, I actually would recommend running it, trying to put in some space for this. Of course, try to be flexible with it. Let me know what you guys think. Do we even need it? Maybe, maybe not. But as it stands right now, this particular lineup works just as well with the deck, and I would honestly recommend giving it a try as it is. Okay, so the first grade 1 slot we are going to be running is Lady Battler of the White Dwarf. Now, she is going to be your generic V grade 3 searcher, which is fine for this deck, because you want to be able to search for either your Ditto Deletor or your Freeze Ray in a way that is semi-consistent. Now, that means that depending on the matchup, you have the ability to search for what you need, right? So if you're going against a multi-attack deck, you're going to want to be able to search for Freeze Ray. And if you're going against a possibly large Vanguard hitting attacker deck with some forms of multi-attack, then you're going to want to go into Ditto Deletor. Either way, they're both really good grade 3s to ride into. But this card will allow you to be flexible as to what you search for it. So with that in mind, I would recommend to run this as a 4 of. Also keep in mind that it can be a generic 13k beater, but that is, of course, if you keep cards in your opponent's bind zone face down, which you do actually run in your G zone, which is something to keep in mind. So the next grade 1 we're going to be running is, of course, at the time of this recording, just a promo. However, with the upcoming clan selection, I do believe it comes out as a reprint. So it is a very, very easy card to get a hold of. Now, the card in question is Punching Deletor Barrel. His effect reads, Soul Blast 1, and your opponent cannot turn his or her cards face up during his or her end phase. That includes countercharging, it includes lock, and it includes deletion. So there are a few reasons why we run it. One, of course, the countercharge denial is useful, but what really helps with this deck is that, one, he works for deletion turns, which means if they don't have another grade 3 to ride or they can't stride, they're stuck on a deleted Vanguard until they have the opportune moment to do so. Or, which I also find really funny is that this card works with Lock, meaning he works with Freeze Ray Dragon. So, if you place this card, Soul Blast 1, and you have Freeze Ray on your Vanguard, if they attack into the Freeze Ray, that card ain't unlocking at the end of their turn. It's staying locked. So they have to really think about what they're doing. It is a very, very useful card to maintain the board, and it is super funny. Of course, you have to keep in mind too, it can be searched out with Clipping Deleter, which is another useful card. So that's why we only run it as a 3 of, leaving us with a few more cards to be flexible with. But of course, you can run it as a 4 of, you can run it as a 2 of. The power of Evo being a card in this deck is very strong, meaning there's a lot of things you can do here. Okay, so the next grade 1 we're going to be running in this deck is the pseudo pitch for Stride for Deletors, and that is Higher Deleter Farnwan. So this card has 2 abilities. The first is if you were to pitch this card for Stride, if you have a Deleter Vanguard and you're going into a Deleter, it counts as a grade 3. Its second ability is Counterblast 1. If it was pitched for the cost of Stride, if you have a Deleter Vanguard, you may call this card to the rearguard circle. So he's an extra sack unit as well as an free pitch for Stride, essentially, because you are running the Ditto Deleter. It does kind of backfire with the Freeze Ray, which is why we only run it as a 2 of. If we were running another Deleter, of course, we'd probably bump it up to 4, but as it stands right now, it's a very, very good card for its utility purposes, but I think 2 of is more than enough. Okay, guys, so the next grade 1 slot we're going to be running is Ill-Fated Deleter Drown. So his effect reads as follows. At the end of the battle that he boosted, if you have a Vanguard with Deleter in its card name, you may put him into the soul, draw 2 cards, and your opponent chooses 1 card from the drop zone and bind it face down. So this card is good for the fact that, 1, it actually surprisingly helps with your Lady Battler boosting abilities, but 2, it helps you search for the necessary combo pieces that you need. Again, this is a pseudo combo oriented based deck, so we want to try and be able to find the combo pieces that we need as fast as we can. So this is a facilitator to get us there. It's a flexible card, I would say. You don't necessarily need to run it, but it's still a good card nonetheless, as it helps search for utility. And if you are running it, of course, let me know what you think. So now we're going to move on to the grade 0s. And what I mean by that is we don't run just our starter and just our triggers. There is an additional grade 0 that we run in order to help us get what we need for this deck. So we're going to be looking at Flutter Deleter Zuigi. Of course, this card does have the Forerunner ability, so you can run it as your starter, but we value the V-Starter a little bit because of the Quick Shield as well as the additional draw. But this card is also good for the following reasons. When he's sacked, you may look at the top card of your deck, and you may call it to rearguard circle. If that card is a Deleter card, you may put Zuigi into the soul, and you may countercharge 1. So it builds up soul, it helps countercharge, and it calls cards additionally to the board. Now, this card is super good for flood potential, in combination with your Given, as well as your Aeodian, which is a Stride that you run in this deck. So it allows you to flood the board very fast, it allows you to build up your soul for combo plays, as well as the fact that it allows you to countercharge, meaning if your opponent is damage denying you in some regard, at least you have a way to be able to have access to counterblast plays. So overall, very strong card. Highly recommend to run it as a 4 of, actually. There aren't that many cards in Vanguard that are like Zuigi, meaning at least in the Deleter lineup. There aren't that many cards that allow you to fill up your board for essentially no cost. Think of it kind of like a 1-for-1. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to the triggers in the deck. Now, if you saw at the beginning of the video, we are of course running a rainbow lineup in this, meaning we run a total of 4 of each trigger being stand, draw, crit, and heal. Now, this deck necessarily doesn't rely on being that type of deck to drive check a million crit triggers and ram into your opponent's face super fast, or drawing a bunch of cards. It's flexible, meaning it really doesn't necessarily matter what you drive check as long as you're doing the combo that you need to do. Therefore, your slots can be very flexible here, and you'll see that in a moment. So, the first grade 0 we're going to be running for our triggers is, of course, Rendering Deleter FMS. So, this card reads as follows. When this card is retired from rearguard circle, if your opponent has a deleted Vanguard, you may check the top card, and you may call it. If it's a Deleter, that unit gets 5k. So, very good in the regard that it's able to sack cards and then refund them, but at the same time, if it's a Deleter, that means you get more power, meaning you're able to push even further. So, it's good in that regard, but keep in mind that it's also a Deleter, and it's also a stand trigger. So if you drive check this in your multi-attack Vanguard combos, and you drive check into this with Given on board, you restand your Given, therefore you restand your Vanguard again. So it's actually kind of like a pseudo over trigger for Dragon Empire, the one that restands the Vanguard. This kind of gets you there. You kind of have to sack a little more though. So in that regard, it's not completely, but with the right combo pieces, it gets you there. It's a very strong card, guys. Run this as a 4-up. Alright, guys, so the next card we're going to be running is, of course, the Pitch for Stride critical triggers that came out in the newest edition of the Premium Collections. So what I mean by that is that it is a 10k power critical trigger, and when you would pitch for the cost of Stride, this trigger counts as a grade 3. Overall, these types of triggers, I think I value more than the ones that we got in the 2019 slot, just because you want to be able to Stride in a majority of decks very fluidly. And this kind of gets you there, actually. It allows you to be flexible with your grade 1 lineups, meaning it doesn't have to be completely pitch for strides. And if you run this, you can just be conservative, keep these in your hand for either defensive plays, and if you didn't use them for defensive guarding capabilities, then this card allows you to pitch for free, basically. I actually value these more, but of course, if you want to run the 2019 trigger, you're more than welcome to do so. And then, of course, our draw trigger is going to be 4 of a PG draw trigger. I mean, it's very self-explanatory, guys. If you don't run PGs, there has to be specific reasons why you're not running PGs. And then, of course, our last trigger lineup is going to be 4 of a heal trigger. Now, you could run the Deletor heal trigger. However, I don't believe there was a V-Series heal trigger. And if you do run the original heal triggers for Deletors, it only has 5k power, and you probably want the 10k power. It's probably a lot more useful. That and the fact that this is also a 20k shield, so it allows for a lot more guarding capabilities. So, yeah. Definitely recommend to run the V-Series heal triggers. And then, of course, our last lineup is the good old V-Starter for Deletors, Sprout Deletor. Again, like I explained earlier, you're going to want draw potential as well as quick shield potential. Both useful cards to have. Okay, guys, and of course, that is the main deck here. So, of course, if you have any personal preferences that you wish to put in instead of this particular lineup, you're more than welcome to do so, but please let me know in the comments down below. Very curious about other people's lineups. But with that being said, let us move on to the G-Zone. Alright guys, so here is the list for the G-Zone. If you'd like to take a screenshot now, of course you may do so. Now, keep in mind that this particular G-Zone, you normally want to go into one particular stripe, 9 out of 10 games. But there are cards here in order to help you with some iffy situations. But of course, I'll be explaining my reasonings like I did with the main deck, so let's go on and do that. Alright, so the first card in the G-Zone is of course going to be the main stride target in this deck, which is going to be Deliberate Deletor Aeodian. So his effect reads, you choose a card with the same name as him from your G-Zone, you flip it face up. You choose a card with Deletor in its card name from your rear guard, and you retire it. And your entire front row gets plus 2k for each card face up in the G-Zone, as well as being able to delete your opponent's Vanguard. So, that in itself is a very strong effect, for a few reasons. One, it pumps up your board, so if your opponent's deleted, then it's technically 0k, meaning your little weenie sticks actually become a lot stronger, especially in the late game. Two, it allows you to facilitate deleting combos, therefore your Zuigis are alive, your FMSs are alive, etc. And then 3, it plays very well with Lie Down Deletor Given, allowing you to have restand Vanguard combo plays. Overall, a very strong card. Okay, so the next card we're going to be running is Glue Ball Avalanche. Now, this particular card has a very nice effect when it comes to locking and controlling the board, but what we mainly care about is its G-Zone ability, in which when an opponent's card would be unlocked, it's actually bound face down instead. It allows you to make pseudo retire plays via Chaos Breaker Light, I would call it. So, it's a very strong card in terms of flexibility, but most times you're not actually going to be going into this card. You just mainly care about probably flipping it up for fodder cost. Okay, so the next card we're going to be running is a new card from the Premium Collection in Nebula Dragon Baryonoid Dragon, I believe its card name is? Anyway, its effect is very simple. When it's placed, you take a card from your G-Zone and turn it face up. Most times it's going to be Glue Ball, and you remove all Force markers, all Excel markers, all Protect markers from your opponent's hand and field, and it gets plus 10k and plus 1 crit for each card removed. So it is a very strong deck for gift spamming decks. If your opponent is like spamming a million different types of Protect markers or a million different types of Excel markers, this is a card that helps you mitigate all of that. Very strong card, but most times you're going to be going into Aeodian, so it's just more of a utility card nonetheless. Okay, so the next card that we're going to be going over is a bit of a weird one. We kind of go into him in situations, but again, it rarely happens. And that card is going to be the original Deletor Geolid, I believe his name is. So his effect reads that if you have a Vanguard with Deletor in its card name, and you have one card in your hand, you may pay the cost of Stride for free and go into him. Now, I'm going to be honest, you normally don't want to be at one card in your hand, especially if you're trying to do a lie down Deletor given turn. So the card is kind of, You're 9 out of 10 times you want to be going into Aeodian, but in those off chances where your opponent for some reason is grade 2 gaming you, which I don't know why you would in this particular deck, this card helps you get there. Basically any card with Deletor in its card name, and then you delete your opponent's Vanguard. So it's a free delete in a sense, but it's not the strongest delete in your deck. Again, Aeodian is going to be your main target in this deck. So he's a good card, but not strong. Alright, so the next card we're going to be running is, of course, another flex card, which is going to be Amnesty Messiah. So its effect is Counterblast 1. I believe you flip a card face up in your G-Zone. I don't even remember that. You probably don't. And you choose any number of cards on the board, and you unlock it. And I believe if you unlocked 3 or more, he gets a crit, and he gets 3k for everything you unlocked. Now, this card in itself, we really, rarely go into. The only reason why we play him is, of course, for the Link Joker mirror matches. Chaos is, of course, probably going to be a very strong contender in Premium. And, of course, you want ways to unlock and keep your opponent sad. So, therefore, you run cards to counter it. Strong card. But most of the time, probably not running it. Now, the next card is going to be your big red button, which is, of course, Xerath Dragon Stark. Now, this particular card, again, you're probably never going to go into, but it is very, very funny if you do, because if for some reason you're able to delete your opponent's Vanguard, which I don't believe you are at the current moment with this particular lineup, but if you find some way, of course, let me know in the comments down below. You can Counterblast 2, use this, and then use this in combination with Given, and you make your opponent cry really, really, really bad. It's a funny card, but most of the time you're not going to be going into this card because you would hope that your opponent actually dies before that. Anyway, nifty card. Don't have to run it, but it's your big red button if you do. Okay, so we're going to be going into our G-Guards now, and the first G-Guard we're going to be going over is the Blaming Deletor Ebioris. Now, his effect reads as followed. He is a G-Guard, and when placed, you may Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1. When he's placed on the Guardian Circle, you choose your opponent's Vanguard, and that Vanguard gets minus 1k for every face-up Deletor in your Vanguard, Rearguard, and G-Zone until the end of the turn. So, very, very good card for defensive plays, especially in combination with Ditto Deletor. I cannot tell you guys how satisfying it is when you match your opponent's Vanguard, and then you slap down the Ebioris, and because of the technically minimum minus 1k, you beat your opponent's Vanguard with them having the effort to pump their own Vanguard. It's hilarious. It's great. It's very memey, but at the same time, it's pretty powerful, which is kind of funny. Yeah, this particular one we run as a 2 of. Not much else to say. Good card. Moving on. Alright, so for our next G-Guard, we're going to be running the G-Guard of Cosmo Wreath. So this card reads, Counterblast 1, your opponent chooses a card from their back row and lock it, and if they do, this unit gets 5k until the end of the battle. So, very generic in this sense. I mean, it's more of a control card than anything else. If they have, an annoying combo piece in the back row and it's their only combo piece, it's a card that kind of helps you get there. But, I mean, most cases, you're going to want to be going into Ebioris anyway. It's just more of a flex spot, to be honest. Speaking of flex spots, our next card is going to be the, I believe, Fighters Collection G-Guardian, Locus Karina. Now, this particular G-Guard is very interesting. It kind of synergizes with your deck, and it kind of doesn't at the same time. You like it for the fact that you're able to control your opponent's board, but most cases, you're really not going to care what's on their board because you have forms in your Vanguard slot, such as Freeze Ray and Ditto Deletor. And because of that, I mean, this card kind of helps with maybe problematic cards. But again, I mean, the grade 3 slot kind of helps you facilitate that. So this card can be run, but at the same time, it doesn't have to. So it's up to you, in all honesty. I run it because I'm particularly more comfortable running it, and there are particular instances where I see that the Ditto Deleter and the Freeze Ray might not help in certain cases. But yeah, guys, that's actually going to do it for the entire list. Overall, I would say that this deck is definitely underlooked. It is a very strong deck, especially with how the meta is turning out right now. And if Chaos Breaker, for some other reason, becomes this undominable power force, there are cards that you can put into the G zone that you can answer to that. You can put in more Messiahs if you want to. You can make it a little more Messiah heavy. You could probably put in a few more unlocking G Guardians, such as Destiny Guardian, which we don't even run, but you can if you want to. This deck has so much potential, and I cannot wait to actually take it to locals in real life. But with that being said, guys, please let me know what you think of the deck list in the comments down below. I'm very curious to know other people's opinions. If you like this sort of profile where I have it on the deck simulator, please, of course, let me know in the comments down below. And if not, you know, of course, I'll go back to the old school deck profiles. But with that being said, guys, this is the Mama John of Team Gradelock signing out. I will see you guys in the next video. Deuces!